Hi, I'm Diane Macedo. We want to get right to some breaking news on Capitol Hill. The final vote for President Trump's megabill is expected soon. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is speaking on the House floor right now, heading into his 7th straight hour here, trying to delay lawmakers' ability to vote on the president's spending bill. Now, once Jeffries is done speaking, House Speaker Mike Johnson will then move to hold that final vote after gaining enough support to pass the bill. At least he says he has enough support. Let's bring in ABC's Jay O'Brien on Capitol Hill and ABC News senior White House correspondent Selina Wang. So, Jay, what parts of the bill is Jeffries focusing on here at 7 hours straight?
Yeah, and so he just crossed that 7-hour mark. He's just about an hour and a half away from breaking the record of the longest floor speech in House history that was previously held by Kevin McCarthy, which he got during the Biden era. But what Hakeem Jeffries has done here, at least how he started, and now the speech, because he's trying to break the record, has kind of meandered, but it began with reading anecdotes from Americans, particularly Americans in swing districts that have Republican members of Congress, but a lot of Democrats in them too, who will be impacted by this bill. And in particular, the cuts to Medicaid, because it has new work requirements for those aged 19 to 64 under Medicaid, and it has cuts to SNAP, new work requirements for SNAP, which is the food assistance program that used to be called food stamps, and it changes the funding mechanism for SNAP, and it forces states to have to shell out more potentially than they have ever had to before. SNAP has traditionally been entirely a federally funded program, and so what we've seen Hakeem Jeffries and Democrats do is seize on those cuts in particular and mention the fact that this bill rolls back tax credits that were created during the Biden administration in the Inflation Reduction Act, in that large piece of legislation for wind and solar, which would have a serious impact on small businesses in this country who have seen a boon over the last few years because of those tax credits. So that's what Hakeem Jeffries has been doing, reading those anecdotes. Largely, of course, this is performative. It's meant to demonstrate opposition to the bill, but because Democrats are in the minority, they can't actually stop this legislation from passing. But still, Speaker Johnson's got his work cut out for him to get this legislation to pass. He can only afford to lose 3 Republicans. He was able to wrangle most of them together to pass that key test vote overnight, despite the fact that the House floor was paralyzed for about 6 hours as he and the president worked on those holdouts. But he has some moderates in particular in his conference who do not like those cuts to Medicaid. That is a newer story. Usually it's Mike Johnson versus the hardline fiscal hawks in his party, the ultra conservatives. Now, keep an eye on those moderates to see if they break with Johnson when we ultimately get to that final vote when Hakeem Jeffries is over.
Selina, some previous holdouts said President Trump made promises to get them to change their vote. What more are you learning about that?
Yeah, some of those holdouts indicated that the president said he could make some adjustments to this bill through executive power. But look, they're not getting significant concessions in order to make their no votes a yes here. They clearly don't want to be seen as stopping President Trump's cornerstone piece of legislation, things that he campaigned on. And the president, he has been following the play-by-play here. He was working the phones, engaging directly with members. Several of those holdouts were here at the White House yesterday as well. And Speaker Johnson said the president was engaged up until 1 a.m. last night. Now, during those meetings with the holdouts here, I'm told by a White House official that the president's message was very much, let's get behind this bill, let's unite, don't give Democrats a win, and this bill is about as good as it's going to get. I'm also told that there was a meeting where some of those holdouts were present along with Vice President J.D. Vance and the president and Dr. Oz, whose role there was to try and calm some of those nerves around the Medicaid cuts, because as Jay was outlining, there's really 2 groups of holdouts here. There's the more moderate Republicans who are worried about those estimates that more than 11 million Americans could lose their health care coverage over the next decade as a result of those cuts to Medicaid. And then the other group of fiscal hawks that are deeply concerned that this could add trillions of dollars to the federal deficit. So the president had his work cut out for him to do the arm twisting. The president had also in recent days repeatedly been threatening to primary any lawmakers who voted no against his legislation. But we're told that during these meetings here at the White House yesterday, the president was very much on a charm offensive. Some of those GOP holdouts walking out with signed souvenirs, photos, and smiles on their faces.
Jay, what are you watching for once Jeffries is done speaking?
Well, keep an eye on how Mike Johnson and House Republican leadership do on keeping their conference together. They were able to squeak out that rule vote overnight. They can afford to, again, lose 3 Republicans. That vote was held open for roughly just about 6 hours. And keep an eye on how they do, as I said, with those moderates. We've already got one, Brian Fitzpatrick, who represents a district that Harris won in Pennsylvania in 2024, who has long said he has issues with Medicaid cuts, and in particular those in this bill, who voted against that key test vote last night. We have our eyes on another, David Valadao of California, who has had similar problems with Medicaid cuts. If they both vote no, then in theory, if Thomas Massie joins them, and you got to keep your eyes on Thomas Massie here, those could be 3 no votes, and Johnson couldn't afford to lose 1 additional vote. But also, like I said, keep your eyes on Thomas Massie. He's broken with Johnson and Trump and House Republican leadership on a number of votes like this before, but he voted for that key test vote last night, so we really don't know where he is going to land in all of this. He has been no friend of this bill, so if he votes yes for it, that would be significant.
All right, Jay O'Brien, Selina, Wang, thank you both.